For some individuals, the journey to divorce can be a long process. And that seems to be the case with Ashley Darby and her husband from the Real Housewives of Potomac. They've been separated now since 2022, which is almost 2 years, and they still have not yet filed for divorce. The parties do have two young children. And so a lot of questions swirl, why don't you just get divorced? And really, a lot of it has to do with the emotional attachment. Divorce can and is definitely a death, especially when you share children together. And having to cope with those emotional issues sometimes requires the intervention of professionals, therapists, counselors to help you navigate divorce. In addition to that, there can be significant financial assets that causes a pause on the parties moving forward, not knowing how to navigate those issues. The parties did state that they did have a prenuptial agreement that expired after 5 years of marriage, which is very typical. Most people think that your prenuptial agreement should last the whole marriage, but really life changes. Circumstances change. Before you get married, most people don't have children. And so making a prenuptial agreement that says one party gets everything and one party gets nothing is very difficult if the parties contemplate having children. So the expiration or the sunset of a prenuptial agreement sometimes will give the parties the opportunity to go back and revisit their estate and their plans and their assets to determine, okay, now that we are 5 years into the marriage, possibly we have 1, 2, 3 kids. How would we distribute our assets and our debts upon divorce? And that could be very different, and it could look very different from what you had before. So a lot of couples will have a sunset date on their prenuptial agreement, or they will require a mandatory date where the parties will have to sit down and either ratify the existing prenuptial agreement or enter into a postnuptial agreement. And for some people are hesitant about that because, and we get it, what if one party doesn't want to do it? It's sunset, they just want to let it go. But in a trusting relationship, you would hope that both parties are mature enough to get in and revisit. And if you're lucky enough, you can address those issues with an open mind prior to the marriage. What's going to happen at year 5? What will happen at year 10, 15? Whatever dates are important to the parties, you want to look at that. But for Ashley Darby and her husband, they're taking their time to getting to the courthouse doors to file those divorce papers. And that is not unusual for many couples. They separate for a period. They deal with the emotional issues. They may have moved on in their social lives, their professional lives, but emotionally they're still attached to their spouse. And a lot of times that has to do with children. So it is not unusual. We wish them all the best in their divorce process, and hopefully it can be peaceful and amicable and for all the parties involved. They also talk about, and she mentions the word parallel parenting as opposed to co-parenting. And she tries to make a very big distinction between parallel parenting and co-parenting. And I think co-parenting, and I don't want to quote Ashley wrong, but co-parenting involves both parents talking to each other, making decisions together, having discussions, negotiations, disagreements, and reaching joint decisions for the most part for issues related to their children. Parallel parenting is basically when the children are with me, I make my decisions. When they're with you, you make your decisions, and we are parenting parallel to each other, but not together with each other. And that is very unfortunate because for young children who are still school age, you do need to make some joint decisions. There's going to be some critical joint decisions that you will need to co-parent, and where parallel parenting will not be sufficient. A lot of times healthcare issues dealing with education, where children go to school, which if children need special attention in school, things like that, you have to work together to maintain consistency and stability for the children.